I'm going to show you everything you need to know about permitting your next real estate investment. I've been a GC for over a decade, pulled hundreds of permits, hired hundreds of contractors, and I've done 300 plus flips for myself. So we're going to go through when you should be pulling permits. We're going to go through how the permitting process actually works, and then we're going to go through the inspections that you're going to be going through. So let's start with, should you be pulling permits or should you be doing unpermitted illegal work? And I'm not going to give you my direct answer here in public, but I'll say I'm not a Boy Scout. I think that the permits are a good thing and they can be a bad thing. And there are rules that you are supposed to follow, and I'm going to tell you about those rules. I'm also going to tell you a few different situations, and I'm going to make it really clear, but you're going to have to make a decision for yourself. So number one is a cosmetic renovation. All right, now in most municipalities, if you go on to the building department, they're going to tell you the things that you need to pull permits for and the things that you don't need to pull permits for. More likely, they're going to give you a list of a few things, and it probably won't be 100% clear. But most places that I pulled permits in, they require you to pull for anything that's not cosmetic. And the line of what is cosmetic and what's not is a little bit blurry. But generally speaking, you would say that flooring and paint, those kind of things are cosmetic renovations. If you were painting the outside of your house, even, unless you're like scraping off old lead paint, then it's more of an EPA issue. All right, but anyway, these are cosmetic things. And in most places, you really aren't required to pull permits. All right, so that's one end of the spectrum. I'm just going to show you my iPad here. So you got one end of the spectrum, you have these cosmetics. Okay, so let's just say you got cosmetic, which is not requiring permits to be pulled. And then on the other side, you have building. Okay, well, if you're building a new addition, you would want to have permits pulled. For one, obviously, even if you are trying to sneak one past the city, that's going to be pretty tough to sneak one past anybody. But two is you really want the permits because then you add the 1,000 square feet or whatever, and you're able to change the tax records. And then when you go to sell the house, you know, it was 1,500 square feet. Now it's 2,500 square feet. And the real estate agent on the other side is like, hey, there's an extra 1,000 square feet here. And so you want to pull the permit, you can change the tax record. Now everything's on the up and up, and you can rightfully get paid for the extra square footage. That is the permitting working in your favor. And we're going to go through like a pro con list. Okay, but now there's something in the middle. Okay, and this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. And to help you figure out what you should personally do here, okay, once again, I'm not a Boy Scout, but officially speaking, you should pull permits anytime you should legally pull permits. But let me tell you a story. A guy that I mentor, and he was doing a project. This truly is a guy that I mentor, not me saying somebody else. But anyway, he is doing a project, and he wanted to finish out the basement. All right, so technically speaking, he is adding square footage, so that might be a situation where it would be in your benefit anyway to pull permits. But let's just say that square footage was already added, and so he wanted to finish out this space. But finishing out the space meant that he had to run plumbing underneath the concrete. He had to run new electrical that was going to be inside of the walls, and he chose to not pull permits. And somebody, maybe a neighbor or something like that, called in the city and said, hey, I think this guy's doing work on the house next door. And so the city went in there, they started snooping around. They saw inside, they saw that some work was happening, which gave them the ability to like go into the house. You know, I know that a lot of you are going to get like pissed about that. Like, can they just go in the house? I don't know. But all I know is that they have quite a bit of authority. And so I am not going to get into the details there. Just that's what happened. And I've seen that happen multiple times. And sure, maybe you can fight something there. This is not a legal channel, so I don't know. But anyway, he goes into the house, goes into the basement, sees that this work's done. And at this point, that project was almost complete. Already had the drywall on, the paint, the floor coverings. And well, that's a crappy situation because he's going to have to cut open the floor. He's going to have to cut open the walls. And I've seen this happen before where people try to not get permits. Then it gets to the end of the project, they get caught and they have to open up a bunch of stuff. And that is a really costly scenario. Okay, but I've also, on the other hand, I've seen people who have done whole projects just like that. Nobody ever knew. They, taped off the windows so nobody could see inside. They're really careful about who's going in and out of the property. If it looked like a project was happening inside, very careful all the way around. And they got through the whole project and nobody knew what happened. Okay, that is your own risk. So you know what happened to my buddy, the guy that I was mentoring, and you could assume how much that might have cost him. And the risk is yours to take. If you want to risk that and not pull permits, that's on you. You could get in some trouble for that. And now you know what that could look like. And, like legal speaking here, like legal trouble speaking, I've never seen anything like that happen, where somebody actually gets in legal trouble. Usually what happens is you get in financial trouble, meaning they come in and they say, hey, I didn't get to inspect anything that's inside of those walls. Now you need to tear down those walls so I can see it. It costs a lot of money and time. So that's really what I've seen that you're risking. So you got to make a decision for yourself. Now, I want to talk about the actual permitting on the projects, what permits you need to pull. And this is going to be way better suited for the iPad. So this is the way that you need to think about it. Okay, this is you as a investor. All right, this is investor you. And you are buying a real estate investment. And you are going to go hire a general contractor. Okay, so you hire a general contractor, or you are the general contractor. Okay, you've probably seen some of my videos about becoming your own general contractor because I believe in the MIY, the manage it yourself philosophy, where you actually hire the subcontractors, you act as the GC, or even go get your GC license. I'm not going to get into the details there, but as a general contractor, you get hired by the investor to do the project on this house. Okay. And the general contractor, what makes you a general contractor is the ability to pull the building permit on that project. And so you can't just say, I want to be a GC, I'm going to pull a building permit. You're going to actually have a license. You're going to have to get a license or have somebody who has a license so you can go pull this permit. Okay. And then here in a few, we're going to talk about the inspections that you get done as a general contractor. But a general contractor's building permit, it's going to cover things like the demo, or you might have to get a separate demo permit, but a general contractor can do that. And framing and, like structural work, most likely you're going to have to get a structural engineer to look at structural work. I know it's getting confusing, but we're going to get through all that stuff. Okay. Framing, insulation, drywall, roofing, siding. These are things that the general contractor pulls a permit for and gets inspections done for. But a general contractor can't pull permits for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So they're going to have mechanical, that's HVAC, okay, different permit. Plumbing, different permit. Electrical, different permit. A lot of places, I have terrible handwriting, sorry. In a lot of places, gas, this is one I just ran into. I had to get a gas, specially licensed gas person to tighten a gas line. It was pretty sweet. Okay, depending on your municipality, you may have different sub permits that need pulled. Okay, but all of these, not just anybody can go pull an electrical permit. Even if you're a general contractor, you can't pull the electrical permit. Even if you're a homeowner, you can't pull the electrical permit. You have to have a licensed electrician pull the electrical permit and do the work, and then they get inspections done. Okay, so this is the main hierarchy of permitting that's needed. Now let's talk about the inspections. So here's what the inspections look like. If you're doing demo, and once again, this is different for different municipalities, but mostly everywhere I've lived, it's kind of like this. Demo, you get an inspection done. After you do the demo, there's framing. Okay. And framing, that looks like envy. But framing has an inspection, okay, but oddly enough, you're not going to get the framing inspection after you do the framing, okay? You're going to first, I'm going to write that nicer for you, framing. First, you're going to have to do the HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and I guess if there is gas, you have to do gas as well. Okay, now once those get done, each one of these separately has a inspection, a rough inspection that needs done. All right, now after you get those done, now you can come and not get the rough building inspection yet, because first you're going to have to do insulation. After the insulation gets done, you're going to get that inspected because they need to make sure that you did it right. And then depending on the municipality, now you have your framing inspection, or they might call it a building inspection, depending on the municipality. Now, some municipalities, they have an insulation inspection and then a framing inspection, and some just have a framing inspection or a building inspection that includes the insulation and the framing. Now, what you could do is you could get a consultative type of meeting after the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and gas is done before you do the installation. And this is why you'd want to do that, is because and this is also why the rough building inspection is after the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and gas, even though you do the framing work beforehand. It's because a plumber might come in there and they're like, oh, I got to run my sewer lines, and it'd be a lot easier if this piece of wood wasn't in my way. So they just cut the piece of wood out there. That piece of wood happened to be your floor joist, and now the floor joist is like 2 inches tall, and it will break if somebody walks on it. Happens all the time. I know, should be simpler than that, but it's not. All right, so you have to get the rough building inspection after mechanical, electrical, plumbing is done, and after insulation is done and passed. But you don't really want to put the insulation in there for fear of you put the insulation in and then you get that passed, but then you have the rough building inspection and they're like, oh, this framing's no good, so you're going to have to rip out that insulation that you just put in there and redo the framing. All right, so sometimes people will, right here, get a consultative type of meeting with the inspector. Happens all the time. No problemo. Okay, and after you get the framing passed, now, depending on where you're at, you have a drywall insulation or a drywall inspection. And, that was odd to me as well when I lived in places that have drywall inspections. But it turns out, after being a good boy and reading the code book, that drywall actually has to do with the structure of the house. That's why there's an inspection there. And so what they do is they come in and they inspect the screws. They make sure that the screws are spaced in the way the code book says that they should be spaced. And the reason why is it actually helps the house get held together and make sure, the studs don't sway from side to side. There's no, the engineers would call that shear forces. But anyway, what it means to us is got to do an inspection after drywall, depending on your municipality, and that costs time, money, and headaches. So good luck. Every inspection that you have might get failed, and you might have to pay more money to do more work. So that's why it's a big deal. All right, but after we get past drywall, we have blue skies ahead. And blue skies. By the way, that's why in the systems that I teach, I call this whole phase right here, all this stuff, I call it the gauntlet, because you got to get through all those inspections. And, it takes longer than it should sometimes. That's what I mean by that, which, brings us back to earlier in this video, why some people make different choices when it comes to that stuff. All right, blue skies ahead. Now we come back to the end of the project. We have already put in, the floors. We've done the paint. We've done the cabinets. You put in the bathroom, the tile. Everything's looking pretty. You put in the light fixtures. You put in the plumbing fixtures. Now you have to get final inspections, or trim inspections, as they might call it. So you come in after all those installs are done, and you're going to call in a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing final inspection, and gas as well. Mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and gas. Okay, and now here you're going to call in the final inspections. These are generally a lot lighter than the rough inspections. Once you get through the rough inspections, you're pretty good to go. But, stuff still comes up. People do things wrong all the time. It's kind of the name of the game, is doing wrong things. Okay, now after you're done with all this stuff, you have a final building inspection. Okay, and now in some municipalities, after you pass the final building inspection, you'll get a CO, a certificate of occupancy. And in some municipalities, you just get your final building inspection passed, and now people know that they can live there and you went through the whole permitting process. Final building inspection is should be straightforward, but a lot of times it's not. This is where they're going to find things like some safety and liability issues, like railings and such. It's going to be like some nitpicky stuff that you most likely forgot to do, even after all these years of doing it. Sometimes I forget to do these things. Another thing they're going to look at is they're going to look at the insulation inside of the attic space. All right, I know that there was an insulation inspection earlier in the process, and you're probably wondering why it didn't get picked up right there. Well, it's because a lot of times people will blow in insulation, like the loose pink stuff that goes in your attic space, and you don't do that till the end of the project, because remember, the insulation inspection came before the drywall inspection. But you need the drywall on to be able to blow the insulation into the attic, because it sits on the top of the drywall. And so that's why you generally get that stuff inspected at the end of the project. All right. But anyway, those are all the inspections. Got to get through them. You get your final building passed, or your certificate of occupancy, depending on where you live. Now, I'm going to go back to where I started. Should you pull permits? I mean, listen, I was like terrified when I first started flipping houses 15 years ago. Like the city trucks would drive by the house, and I'd like hit the deck to make sure nobody saw me, and have come a long way since then, where it's not worth it to go through the situation like my buddy did. And I've definitely seen that happen, been involved in that over the years, and that's not worth it. It's worth it to it's better to just have a process and keep running the play. But I just told you how things work. You go make decisions for yourself, and good luck out there, guys. You know that I have the free community on School, the solo house flipper methodology, similar to the things we talked about. And I am personally on there every day answering every question. Most of the time when I make these videos, that's where that came from. And this just came from a call that I had right before this, where I was answering somebody's questions about permitting and realized that was a thing people needed to know about. So check that out. And also check out this video right here. Talk to you soon. Thanks.